Before I ever set foot inside Tham Luang, I thought I already knew the story. 12 boys, 1 coach, a flooded cave, and a rescue the whole world called a miracle. But in northern Thailand, near the mountain they call the Sleeping Lady, people count the story differently. They count the ones who entered the dark water. They count the ones who carried rope. They count the ones who came back breathing, but never came back whole. And when the cave whispered my name, I finally understood why some places do not haunt you because people died there. They haunt you because something there remembers everyone who was ever afraid. I did not go to Tham Luang looking for a ghost. That is the first thing I need to say. I went there for a story. A real story. The kind people already knew by heart, even if they had never been to Thailand. A youth soccer team. 12 boys and their coach. A flooded cave in the mountains of Chiang Rai. The whole world watching as divers disappeared into black water, day after day, trying to bring them home. Everyone knew the miracle. Everyone knew the rescue. But in northern Thailand, near the border with Myanmar, people talk about Tham Luang in a different voice. They do not talk about it like a news event. They talk about it like a place that was sleeping. And for a few weeks in 2018, something woke up. I first heard the name Tham Luang in a hotel room in Los Angeles. It was raining outside. The television was on without sound. And I remember seeing a line of rescue workers walking through mud under floodlights. The cave entrance looked like the mouth of something ancient, something patient. Years later, when I started producing documentary-style audio stories about haunted places, Thailand came up again and again. Manak, the Ghost Tower, the Death Railway. But Tham Luang was different. It was not abandoned. It was not cursed in the usual way. People had survived there. That should have made it less frightening. Instead, it made it worse. Because survival stories always leave a question behind. Why them? Why that day? And what exactly had let them go? I arrived in Chiang Rai in late May, just before the heavy rains were supposed to become serious. The sky had that metallic brightness you get before a storm, and the mountains beyond the highway looked like they were lying on their backs under a blanket of jungle. My driver, a thin man named Somchai with a cracked phone mount and a habit of tapping the steering wheel whenever we passed a shrine, pointed through the windshield. "Doi Nong Nan," he said. I looked up. The ridge stretched along the horizon in the shape of a reclining woman. Once you saw it, you could not unsee it. The slope of a forehead. The lift of a nose. The long body of a woman asleep beneath the clouds. "Sleeping Lady," Somchai said. "I have heard the legend," I told him. He smiled without looking away from the road. People hear legend, but mountain hear people. I laughed because I thought he was joking. He did not laugh with me. The road narrowed as we approached the forest park. Vendors sat near the entrance under faded umbrellas, selling bottled water, grilled bananas, amulets, and little garlands of jasmine. There were families there too. Tourists, children holding hands, people taking photos under the sign. It almost felt normal. Almost. But the closer we got to the cave, the colder the air became. Not mountain cool. Not shade cool. It was the kind of cold you feel when you open a refrigerator in the dark and, for half a second, imagine someone is standing on the other side. I met my local guide near a small pavilion. His name was Preacha. He was in his early 40s, with kind eyes, a soft voice, and a scar running from the corner of his jaw down into his collar. He told me he had worked around the park for years, first as maintenance, then as a guide after the rescue made the place famous. "You record audio?" he asked, nodding at the microphone in my bag. "Mostly ambience," I said. "Footsteps, water, silence. That kind of thing." He looked at me carefully. "In Tham Luang," he said, "silence is not empty." I thought that was a good line. I even wrote it down. At the time, I did not understand it was a warning. Before we entered, Preacha stopped at a small shrine near the mouth of the cave. There were flowers there, red cloth, incense, small offerings placed carefully on stone. A few visitors bowed their heads. Preacha took a jasmine garland from a vendor and set it down. "For the lady?" I asked. "For respect," he said. "Not the same thing." He told me the legend while we waited for the group ahead of us to move on. A princess from an old northern kingdom had fallen in love with a man beneath her station. Some versions said he was a stable boy. Others said a soldier. Some said a commoner from the valley. They ran away together after she became pregnant, hiding in the mountains from her father's men. Exhausted, the princess rested inside a cave while her lover went to find food. He never came back. When she learned he had been killed, she took a hairpin from her hair and stabbed herself. Her blood became the river. Her body became the mountain. Her spirit remained beneath the stone. "People say the cave is her heart," Preacha said. "And the water?" He looked toward the dark opening. "Her tears, or her breath. Depends who is telling." The mouth of Tham Luang was larger than I expected. Not a neat tunnel, not a tourist cave with colored lights and smooth paths, but a raw opening in limestone, green with moss and framed by thick jungle. The kind of entrance that makes you feel like you are being watched from inside. I started recording before we crossed the threshold. The first sound on the file is my own breathing. The second is water. Not loud. Just a slow drip somewhere beyond the light. Then Preacha's voice. "Stay with me. Do not wander." Inside, the cave swallowed the heat immediately. My shoes scraped over damp stone. The air smelled of clay, minerals, wet leaves, and something faintly metallic, like old coins left in a sink. Preacha moved easily, his flashlight angled toward the floor. I followed him through Chamber 1, where the cave still felt wide enough to belong to the outside world. There were signs, rails, and the occasional distant voice of another visitor. But every few steps, I looked deeper into the black spaces beyond the marked path. The cave did not feel empty. It felt occupied by waiting. Preacha pointed to a darker passage and explained where rescue teams had staged equipment during the operation. He described pumps running day and night, divers carrying tanks, volunteers cooking food outside, families praying, reporters standing in the mud. His voice stayed calm, but the cave changed around the words. Every sentence seemed to make the darkness heavier. "Were you here then?" I asked. He paused. "Yes." "During the rescue?" He nodded once. "What did you do?" "Small things," he said. "Carry rope, carry food, help people who were tired. Everybody did something." There was humility in the way he said it. Not false modesty, something deeper, like he did not want the cave to hear him take credit. We continued inward with 2 park staff and a few other visitors behind us. A young couple from Australia, a Thai family with a teenage daughter, a German backpacker who kept checking his phone even though there was no signal. The further we went, the more the cave narrowed. The ceiling dipped. Limestone formations leaned over us like frozen waves. My recorder picked up every scrape, every drip, every whisper. At one point, Preacher stopped so abruptly I nearly walked into him. "What is it?" I asked. He held up his hand. Everyone went still. For a moment, there was only water. Then I heard it. Three soft knocks. The teenage girl behind us whispered something to her mother. The German backpacker laughed nervously. "Rockfall." Preacher did not answer. Came again. Not random. Not falling stone. 3 knocks, evenly spaced. Like someone tapping the wall from the other side. One of the park staff called out in Thai. His voice bounced away and returned in broken pieces. No answer. Preacher waited, listening. Then he said, "We go back." The Australian man frowned. "Is something wrong?" "No," Preacher said. "We go back now." Nobody argued with the tone of his voice. As we turned around, my flashlight caught something on the left wall. At first I thought it was just wet clay. Then I saw the shape. A handprint. Small. Too small for an adult. Pressed into the mud at shoulder height. I stopped. Preacher noticed immediately. "Do not touch," he said. I was not going to. The handprint looked fresh. The lines of the palm were clear. The fingers were thin and slightly spread, as if someone had braced themselves while climbing out of water. "How old is that?" I asked. Preacher stared at it for a long moment. "Old enough," he said. That was the first moment I felt afraid. Not startled. Not excited in the way you get when you think you might have found something creepy for a story. Afraid. Because Preacher looked like a man who had seen that handprint before. Outside, rain had started. It came down hard, sudden and violent, hammering the leaves so loudly that conversation became difficult. Visitors hurried toward cars and shelters. Vendors pulled plastic covers over their tables. I stood under the pavilion with my recorder still running, watching muddy water thread down the steps. "That came fast," I said. Preacher looked up at the mountain. "She changes her mind fast." I thought he meant the weather. By then, I was already planning the episode in my head. The title, the opening lines, the sound of rain, the legend of the sleeping lady, the rescue, The handprint. I asked Preacher if I could interview him later. He shook his head. Not me. Do you know someone who would talk? He looked across the road at an old woman selling garlands beneath a blue tarp. May Molly, he said. She remembers more than she says. May Molly was small, maybe 70 or maybe 100. It was hard to tell. She wore a pale cardigan despite the heat and sat beside a table covered with flowers, incense, and cheap plastic rain ponchos. When Preacher introduced us, she looked at me for a long time before asking him something in Thai. He answered. She turned back to me. You listen to ghosts? She asked in English. I listen to stories. She smiled. Same work. I bought a garland from her even though I did not know what to do with it. She took it from my hands, touched it to her forehead, and gave it back. For protection, she said. From what? From curiosity. That night I stayed at a guest house near Mae Sai. The rain did not stop. It fell through dinner, through the evening, through the long hours after midnight. Water ran down the street in silver sheets. Dogs barked and went quiet. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the mountains like something turning over in sleep. I sat at the small desk in my room and listened to the audio from the cave. At first, it was exactly what I expected. Footsteps. Drips. Preacher explaining the rescue. The muffled voices of the tour group. Then came the knocks. On the recording, they sounded closer than they had in the cave. Too close. Played them again. Then, beneath the third knock, something else. A breath. Not mine. Not Preach's. A small inhale near the microphone. I froze. I rewound and played it again louder. This time I heard a whisper. Very soft. Very close. Count again. I stopped the fire. The room seemed to shrink around me. Rain battered the window. I told myself it was audio distortion. A fragment of someone's voice. A sound from the group behind us shaped by echo and imagination. Still, I did not play it again. I shut my laptop and lay awake until dawn, listening to water move through pipes inside the walls. The next morning, the sky was clear. That was the strange part. The storm had been so violent that I expected flooding, broken branches, muddy roads. But by sunrise, the world looked washed and bright. The mountains stood green and silent under a pale blue sky. When I returned to the forest park, May Molly was already at her table. Before I could speak, she said, "You heard something." I stopped. She threaded jasmine onto a string. People always look different the morning after. I heard a voice on my recording. What did it say? I hesitated. Count again. Her hands stopped moving. Only for a second. Then she continued. You should. Count what? She looked toward the cave. What everyone counts. I knew the answer before she said it. 12 boys, she whispered. 1 coach. 13 alive. She tied off the garland and set it down. But when people tell miracle, they count only who came out breathing. A chill moved through me. You mean the diver who died? May Molly's expression softened. Brave man. Good soul. But not only him. I waited for her to explain. She did not. Instead, she reached under the table and took out a small object wrapped in red cloth. She placed it in my palm. It was a hairpin. Old, darkened, slightly bent. A simple piece of metal no longer than my finger. I almost dropped it. What is this? For the lady. I cannot take that. You already did. I looked at her, confused. She pointed at my backpack. I opened the front pocket. Inside, wrapped in damp mud, was an identical hairpin. For several seconds, I could not move. I had not put it there. I had not even seen it before. Preacher appeared beside the table as quietly as if the mountain had sent him. His eyes went to the hairpin in my hand, then to the one in my backpack. His face changed. You touched the wall, he said. No, I did not. His voice dropped. You touched something. I wanted to leave then. I should have left. That is the part of the story where everyone listening thinks they would have packed their bag, gone back to Chiang Rai, caught the next flight to Bangkok, and never said the name Tham Luang again. Maybe you would have. I did not. Because fear and curiosity are closer than people like to admit. And because I had come all the way across the world for a story. By noon, I had convinced myself there was a logical explanation. Someone had slipped the hairpin into my bag as a prank. Maybe May Molly wanted to scare tourists. Maybe Preacher was in on it. Maybe the whisper on the recording was a coincidence. So when Preacher told me not to return to the cave that afternoon, I asked why. Rain comes again. The sky is clear. The mountain is not. I looked up at Doi Nong Non. The ridgeline was still and green. White clouds moved slowly above it. I just want to record near the entrance, I said. Not go deep. Preacher shook his head. No cave today. But May Molly, still sitting behind her flowers, said something in Thai. Preacher turned sharply toward her. They argued quietly. I understood none of the words, but I understood the emotion. Preacher was angry. May Molly was calm. Finally, Preacher looked at me. She says if the lady gives you a hairpin, you must return it before sunset. Return it where? He did not answer. That was how I found myself walking back toward Tham Luang with Preacher beside me, the hairpin wrapped in red cloth inside my jacket pocket. The park was quieter than the day before. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that does not come from absence, but from everyone listening at once. At the shrine, Preacher lit incense. His hands were steady, but his lips moved quickly in prayer. Leave the recorder, he said. No. He glanced at me. Some things should not be kept. I am not here to disrespect anything. Intent does not matter in caves, he said. Only action. I kept the recorder. That decision still wakes me up some nights. We entered at 3:17 p.m. I remember because I checked my watch at the mouth of the cave. I wanted a timestamp for the episode. The air inside was colder than before. The first chamber seemed darker too, though the light outside was still strong. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling. Not much. Just enough to make the cave sound alive. Preacher led me beyond the section most visitors reached. He had permission, he said. He knew the staff. He knew where it was safe. I believed him because I wanted to. The passage narrowed. The floor became slick. At one point, we had to crouch beneath a low ceiling where the limestone pressed down like a weight over our backs. My breathing echoed inside my ears. The beam of my flashlight shook slightly. "How far?" I asked. "Not far." That is what guides say in every story before things go wrong. We reached a muddy slope where the wall curved inward. There, half hidden behind a ridge of stone, was a small recess filled with offerings. Not the public shrine outside. This one was older. Private. There were faded ribbons, coins, a child's soccer cleat, a rusted flashlight, and several hairpins pushed into cracks in the stone. Preacher pointed. "Put it there." I took the hairpin from my pocket. The cave seemed to become very still. Even the water stopped dripping. As I leaned forward, my flashlight flickered. Once. Twice. Then went out. Darkness dropped over us so completely that I lost the shape of my own body. "Preacher." No answer. I reached blindly toward where he had been standing. My hand met only wet stone. "Preacher." My voice came back wrong. Too many echoes. Too many directions. Then, somewhere ahead, a child laughed. Not loudly. Not happily. Just a small breath of laughter in the dark. My flashlight came back on. Preacher was gone. The passage behind me looked different. I know how that sounds. Caves are disorienting. Darkness alters distance. Fear turns corners into mouths and shadows into figures. But I am telling you, the passage had changed. The slope we had climbed was no longer there. The wall where the offering sat had become a narrow opening. Beyond it, my light caught a wet tunnel slanting downward. "Preacher!" I shouted. This time, something answered. Three knocks from inside the tunnel. I should have stayed where I was. I should have called for help. But there was no signal. No guide. No clear way back. And then I heard a voice. A boy's voice. "Coach?" The word came from below. Soft. Frightened. Human. Every part of my body went cold. I crouched and aimed the flashlight into the tunnel. The beam caught muddy water. Limestone. A scrap of red cloth tied around a rock. Then something pale moved at the edge of the light. A hand. Small fingers gripping stone. "Hey!" I called. "Are you okay?" The hand slipped away. I went after it. The tunnel was tight enough that my shoulders brushed both sides. Mud soaked through my jeans. My backpack scraped against the ceiling. The air grew warmer, then colder, then strangely sweet, like flowers left too long in standing water. I kept hearing movement ahead. A footstep. A splash. A whisper. Sometimes it sounded like one child. Sometimes many. After maybe 10 minutes, the tunnel opened into a chamber I had never seen on any map. My flashlight beam rose slowly. The ceiling disappeared into darkness. The floor was a wide shelf of mud above a pool of black water. And on the far wall were handprints. Dozens of them. Small hands. Adult hands. Some pressed deep into clay. Some barely visible. Some old and cracked. Some fresh enough to shine. I lifted the recorder without thinking. "This is Daniel Harper," I whispered, though my voice barely sounded like mine. "I am inside Tham Luang. I got separated from my guide. I found a chamber with..." My words died. There were 13 handprints in a row at eye level. 12 small. One larger. Beneath them, scratched into the mud, were marks like tally lines. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 13, then a space, then a 14th mark. Unfinished. A single vertical line, cut into the clay like someone had started counting again and stopped. Behind me, water splashed. I turned. A woman stood at the edge of the pool. She was not close. Maybe 30 feet away. Maybe 300. Distance made no sense in that place. She wore a long pale dress, soaked through and clinging to her body. Her black hair hung over her shoulders. Her face was partly hidden, but I could see her eyes. They were open. That was the worst part. Not dead. Not empty. Open. Awake. I could not speak. She raised one hand and pointed to the wall. To the handprints. Then to me. A voice filled the chamber. Not loud. Not echoing. Inside my head. Count again. My knees nearly gave out. "I do not know what you want," I said. The woman took one step forward. The pool moved with her, though her feet did not touch it. Images flashed through the chamber. Not like a movie. Like memories forced into the air. I saw boys in soccer jerseys walking into the cave, laughing, their bikes left outside. I saw rain darkening the jungle. I saw water pouring through stone channels, rising and rising. I saw families kneeling in mud. Divers carrying tanks. Hands passing ropes. Men asleep sitting up. Women cooking rice under tarps. Monks chanting. Machines pumping water. Flashlights moving in black tunnels like trapped stars. Then I saw something else. A man I did not know crawling through a narrow passage with a coil of rope over one shoulder. Not a diver. Not a soldier. Just an ordinary man in a soaked gray shirt, breathing hard, pulling equipment through mud. His face was turned away. Someone shouted behind him. The water surged. His light went out. The vision vanished. I was back in the chamber, gasping. The woman pointed again. The 14th mark on the wall looked wet. Fresh. I backed away. "No," I whispered. "No, I am not part of this." The cave answered with a sound like 1,000 drops of water falling at once. Then the pool began to rise. Slowly at first. A dark line climbing the mud shelf. I turned and ran. The tunnel was not where I had left it. I found 3 openings instead of 1. All black, all low, all breathing cold air. Behind me, water lapped over stone. I chose the middle passage. For the next 20 minutes, I crawled through the mountain. At least, I think it was 20 minutes. Time broke apart in there. My watch stopped at 4:04. My phone screen went black. The recorder kept running. I know because I could see the red light blinking against the mud whenever I looked down. The passage twisted. Sometimes it rose steeply, forcing me to claw forward on my elbows. Sometimes it dropped so suddenly that I slid into shallow water, banging my knees against hidden rock. I called Preach's name until my throat hurt. No answer. Only knocks. Always ahead. Always just far enough to follow. Then, after a long crawl through a section barely wider than my body, I saw light. Not daylight. Flashlight. It bobbed on the wall ahead. "Preacher!" I shouted. The light stopped. A figure stood at the end of the passage. For a second, relief hit me so hard I almost cried. Then the figure stepped forward. It was not Preacher. It was a boy, maybe 12 years old. Thin, barefoot, covered in mud. He wore a soccer jersey with no number on it. His face was calm in a way no lost child's face should be calm. "Where is Preacher?" I asked. The boy tilted his head. "You count wrong." His English was careful, like someone repeating words he had heard from another mouth. "I do not understand." He lifted one muddy hand. Behind him, the passage filled with other shapes. Children. Men. Women. A diver with no face visible behind a mask. A monk. A ranger. People standing shoulder to shoulder in a tunnel too narrow to hold them. The boy said, 13 came out. I nodded quickly. Yes, 12 boys and the coach. He shook his head. More went in. The figures behind him seemed to lean closer. "More always go in," he said. Then his eyes shifted past me. I turned. Water was coming. Not rushing like a wave. Advancing like a decision. Black water filled the passage behind me from wall to wall. When I looked back, the boy was gone. In his place was my guide. Preacher stood at the far end of the tunnel, holding out his hand. "Move!" he shouted. I moved. I do not remember the next part clearly. I remember crawling toward him. I remember his hand closing around my wrist. I remember being dragged through a gap I never would have seen alone. I remember rock tearing my jacket. I remember water at my ankles, then my knees. I remember Preacher shouting, "Do not listen behind you." Of course, I listened. Behind me, in the flooded dark, someone called my name. Not Daniel. Not Dan. My full name. Daniel Robert Harper. The only person who ever used my full name was my mother. And she had been dead for 6 years. I stopped moving. Preacher slapped me. Hard. The shock brought me back. "Not her," he said. "Run." We ran. The cave opened suddenly into a familiar chamber, then another. I saw a rail, a sign, the pale rectangle of daylight ahead. We stumbled out of Tham Luang at 5:46 p.m. Outside, the park was dry. No storm, no flood. Tourists were taking photos near the entrance. A little boy was eating ice cream. May Molly stood by her table watching us. I bent over and vomited into the grass. Preacher sank down beside the shrine and pressed his forehead to the stone. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, I looked at him. What happened in there? He did not answer. Who was the man with the rope? Preacher closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. My brother. The mountain seemed to quiet around us. He was a volunteer? I asked. Preacher nodded. During the rescue? Yes. But I thought only. I stopped myself. Only what? Only the names I had read? Only the deaths the world repeated? Only the sacrifices that made it into documentaries? Preacher looked toward the cave. My brother did not die in the cave, he said. Not officially. He came out. He smiled. He said he was fine. His voice lowered. 3 months later, he walked into the forest before sunrise. They found his shoes near the water. Never found him. I said nothing. Preacher wiped mud from his hands. He used to say someone called him from inside. Every night. Same voice. The sleeping lady? Maybe. He looked at me. Maybe the cave does not know how to release people. Maybe some part of you stays where you were most afraid. That night, I packed my bags. I did not listen to the recording. I did not shower until I reached Chiang Rai City because I was afraid of seeing mud run down the drain. I booked a flight to Bangkok and told myself the story was over. But stories like that do not end when you leave the place. They end when the place leaves you. 3 days later, in my hotel room in Bangkok, I finally opened the audio file. It was 6 hours long. That made no sense. I had been inside the cave for less than 3. The file began normally. My voice at the entrance. Preacher explaining the shrine. Footsteps. Dripping water. Then the section where we reached the hidden offering place. I heard my flashlight click. I heard myself say Preacher's name. Then silence. Not empty silence. Listening silence. For nearly 2 minutes, nothing happened. Then a woman began to sing. No instruments. No echo. Just a low, soft melody in a language I did not understand. My skin prickled. Under the song, I heard water rising. Then my own voice. This is Daniel Harper. I am inside Tham Luang. I skipped forward, hands shaking. There were the knocks. The boy's voice. Preacher shouting. Water. My breathing. Then, near the end, just before we came out, there was something I did not remember hearing. A man's voice. Not Preacher. Not mine. He spoke in Thai first. Then, in English, he said, "Tell him I carried the rope. The recording ended with 3 knocks. I closed the laptop. Outside my hotel window, Bangkok glowed and roared, alive with traffic, neon, and heat. A city of millions. A place where ancient mountains and flooded caves should have felt impossibly far away. But on the desk beside my laptop, there was mud. A small smear of it. Dark red-brown. Wet. In the middle of it lay a hairpin. The same one I had returned. Only now, tied around it with a thread of jasmine, was a strip of gray fabric. From a shirt. I flew home 2 days later. I told myself I would not use the story. For a month, I kept the audio file in a locked folder and tried to move on to other episodes. Other places. Other legends. But every time I recorded narration, the waveform showed 3 spikes before I spoke. Every night, I dreamed of a mountain shaped like a sleeping woman. Every morning, I found damp clay under my fingernails. Finally, I sent a message to Precha. Just 1 line. Why did she give it back? He replied 12 hours later. She did not give it back. Then another message came through. She gave it to the next person who must count. I stared at the screen until it blurred. The 3rd message appeared. Not from Precha. From an unknown number. No profile photo. No name. Just text. 14. That was when I checked the recording one last time. I had never listened past the end. I did not know you could. But when I opened the file again, the audio was longer. 6 hours. 13 minutes. 14 seconds. At the very end, after the knocks, after the silence, after what should have been nothing, I heard my own voice. But older. Weaker. Breathing hard. Whispering from somewhere deep inside stone. I found the way out. A pause. Then I heard myself say, but I came out alone. I have not been back to Thailand. I have not deleted the file. I have not used the hairpin. It sits on my desk in a sealed glass box, though every few weeks I find the lid slightly open. Sometimes, when it rains, the room smells like limestone. Sometimes, when I wake in the dark, I hear children whispering numbers in the hallway. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 13. Then they stop. They always stop there. Because they are waiting for me to finish. And now, if you ever visit Tham Luang, if you stand before that great dark mouth in the mountain of the sleeping lady, remember this. Do not go in counting only the ones who came back. Count the hands that carried rope. Count the divers who entered black water. Count the mothers who waited in the rain. Count the men who came home with part of the cave still calling their names. Count the living. Count the dead. Count the ones the world forgot. And if, somewhere in the dark, you hear 3 soft knocks from beyond the wall, do not answer. Because the cave is not asking who you are. It already knows. The cave is asking if you are ready to be counted. If you believe some real places keep more than history inside them, Subscribe to Infinite Story Realm for more true location horror stories, legends, and mysteries from around the world. And if you ever visit a cave, a ruin, a tunnel, or a road where people still leave offerings, remember this. Take only your footsteps, leave only respect, and never answer a voice that already knows your name.